Today I'm going to do something that is potentially embarrassing, it's revealing, and I feel like I'm opening myself up for a bit of humble pie straight to the face. But what we're going to do today is take a close look through my scripts. You'll see what my code looks like after just 2 months of learning a programming language for the first time, and just 4 weeks into the development on my very first game. But quickly before we get into it, I've promised on Twitter that I'd shout out to all my new subscribers today. Because I've got such a small channel, it's pretty manageable. But to each and every one of you, I'm truly grateful for your support and interest. So here goes. Team Op. Thanks guys. You're on top. iOS Gamer Tool. You're seriously cool. Ash Patel. I think you're swell. Mohammed Junaid. You got it mate. Thanks to all of you for being my first viewers. I hope you'll enjoy following the rest of my journey, and yeah, just thanks for being part of the channel. Now let's go over what I've achieved this week. I've had a little less time because my brother's been staying, but I've still managed to spend a few hours each day on the game. Let's take a look at the Trello. I've spent a lot of my time tweaking the collisions and damage. Still far from perfect, but it's getting there. I've added a get stunned coroutine to the pirate, so I can easily add stun to him. I've animated and scripted a roll mechanic. I've been learning how to ignore collisions between layers, so you can now roll past the pirate, so we're ignoring the collisions while you're rolling. Also ignoring like can't take damage or anything like that, so you're basically invulnerable while you're rolling, but you also can't really do any damage either. Also played around with raycasts for the first time. When my pirates detect the player, now they share their detection with the other pirates nearby, and they all come and get you. And to finish the week off, I've added a few temporary sound effects, which are kind of crack up. Okay, let's dig into my scripts. This is the part where I feel super naked. We're going to look at my player controller. So I would love feedback on these scripts from anyone who would like to pitch in. As I've said, I'm brand new to this, and these are probably going to look really sloppy. I'm probably doubling up on a whole lot of stuff that I don't need to be doing, but here's my controller script. Let's just zoom in a little bit for you. I'm using a few additional things. I'm pretty sure this scene management, I think is like a legacy feature, and I shouldn't really be using it. I should be using another method. The reason I'm using that is to, when your health drops to 0, basically restarts the game just so that we can quickly test things out. Starting off with my variables for health, I've declared a health bar, which within that I've got a slider, which I'll show you. Like, look at all the things that I've made public. It's kind of crazy, but I've just been wanting to monitor some of these things. I should probably go back and make them private. But you'll see in this player health bar canvas, we've got a health bar, and this is where I've got a slider. Can control this slider from my script and see our health dropping all the way down, and that's where we trigger that restart of the game. So yeah, we'll jump back into the scripts. Got max health, we've got a current health integer, and I've also got a can take damage bool, so sometimes I disable the ability to take damage. So let's jump into the references for this. So on the start function, setting this health bar to max health. Further down we've got basically where we take some damage. So I've got a custom function here for taking damage where I can set a variable amount of damage from wherever I'm calling that take damage function. You can see here taking damage off the current health, and then we're displaying what the current health is. So updating that set health, which will update the slider. So let's have a look at where we're taking damage as well. So if I'm not parrying, not facing the pirate, and the pirate is primary attacking, I'm going to get stunned. So let's jump back up and take a look at the next stuff. So how about we go in and take a look at my movement script. So it's a pretty basic movement script. I've got it happening in update. So I'm setting my inputs. So I'm declaring that what the horizontal input is. Jump down, here are movement controls. So basically I'm checking that we're actually getting a decent amount of input on those axes. For movement, I'm checking an is on ground bool to make sure that the character's on the ground. So that's basically checking that you've collided with the ground collider. I've also got a recovery bool here, and I'm making sure that we're not rolling. So here is the movement What I'm doing here is I'm actually checking that we're not clicking the move modifier button. So I've made a move modifier button input, which is basically if you are holding that move modifier and move left or right, you're going to roll. So if you're not pressing that, then you're just going to have normal movement. We're doing a transform translate. I'm not doing like a physics add force for my movement at this stage. So you're just taking your horizontal input, multiplying it by a move speed variable, and by time.delta time. We're setting our last move to what the horizontal input is, because I'm using that last move to detect what animation is playing. And we're setting player moving to true. So here's the roll function. So here it's if you're pressing the horizontal input, left or right, you're going to set the last move again to the last move direction, and you're going to set the animation trigger to roll. I've got a sprint function. So if you hold down a sprint key, which at the moment on the keyboard is your left shift, and it's clicking down the left stick on a gamepad, you're going to sprint. So it's basically, it's just increasing the move speed to a sprint speed. And if you're not sprinting, move speeds to the default speed there. We're also adding fatigue. So there's a fatiguing system, which I'm thinking about swapping out for a simpler one, because I basically made this one up when I was first starting out a few weeks ago. I want to make a stamina fatigue system that's a lot more like the health system that I've got currently. Yeah, this fatigue count, basically we're adding fatigue every second based on the sprint fatigue, which I think is 1. So we're adding like 1 to our fatigue count every second. So the longer you sprint, the more fatigue you're adding. And once you get to 100% of that fatigue amount, then you have a short, I think 3 seconds of, you can only walk very slowly and you can't attack or anything like that. This is how I'm animating the movement. So it's movement on the x-axis based on the horizontal input. We're setting is the player moving bool based on my bool within the script called player moving. We're setting this float based on our last move on the x-axis. So the last move is a vector 2 that we saw we were setting up here. Depending on our input, we're setting that last move vector 2, but I'm just taking that x-axis into a float. We've got a bool for secondary active and another bool for fatigued. Okay, so that's the main moving controls there. Here's where I'm displaying fatigue. So basically I'm displaying stamina plus the fatigue count divided by the fatigue max level times 100. That's giving us the percentage of stamina. And once you get to 100%, then you're going to be fatigued. It's a little bit messy. I don't like the fatiguing system at all at the moment, but it's working. So yeah, I do want to completely revamp that at some stage. So you don't display the fatigue until you're getting a bit fatigued. So it'll display over 0.2. I think it's only going up to 3. It's all really weird. It's weird. Like once you get to 3, that's when you're fatigued. It should probably just be 100, like the health system, as I said. So when you do get fatigued, here is how we recover from fatigue. So basically, if we're not moving, our fatigue count is going to go down every second. It'll go down slower if we are still moving. If we're not moving, we're going to regain our stamina. If we are moving, we are going to regain our stamina, but at half the speed. But we won't regain any stamina if we're sprinting, attacking. This is where I'm triggering that fatigue state. Here, if our fatigue count is larger than our max level, so I've set that max level previously, then fatigue is true. And we reset our fatigue count back to 0. And now we have to spend a bit of time in this fatigue state. So if we are fatigued, which we become from this here, then we set our move speed to a fatigued speed, which is super slow. And if we're not already recovering from fatigue, we start this coroutine here. Start fatigue recovery. So let's go have a look at that coroutine quickly. So here's the coroutine for fatigue recovery. So basically at the start of the coroutine, we are recovering from fatigue. We're going to wait for seconds here, and that's the fatigue recovery time, which I can change at any point. I think it's about 3 seconds at the moment. Once those 3 seconds are up, we're going to set fatigued back to false, and we're no longer recovering from it. So this coroutine can start up again. That's basically how my fatigue system is working at the moment. As I said, it's pretty ugly. Let's have a look at the combat controls now. So I'm calling the combat controls within the update function. So here we go. We've got a fire 1, which is primary attack. That's that heavy attack. I've mapped this fire 1 to it's W on the keyboard or it's your right trigger on the gamepad. If you have primary, basically that's just as soon as you fire off your primary attack, you have a cooldown period where you can't use it again. So we're checking that we have it. We're checking we're on the ground. We need to check that we're recovered, that the secondary attack isn't active, that we're not fatigued, and we're not parrying. That's going to trigger off this custom function called primary attack. So let's go look at that. So here is our primary attack function. So this is where I get a little bit confused because as you can see, I'm adding some force within this custom function and I'm still unsure if I'm using force here in a custom function. Is that updating every frame? Is it updating every second? Like, is it like update or is it like fixed update when you're doing it in a custom function? I don't know. So I don't know whether I should be multiplying by time.delta time or not. Yeah, anyway, so when primary attack is triggered or called, we trigger the primary attack animation. We set has primary to false and we add force in the direction of our last move. And we're doing an impulse force, so it's an instant force. And I'm adding additional force here if the player is moving, or even more additional force if the player is sprinting. So basically you're going to move further based on those variables there. We're adding fatigue as well. So we've got a specified number of fatigue for the primary attack there. Then, because we've set primary to false, we're going to start this primary cooldown, which is a coroutine that's going to recover that primary attack. So let's take a wee look at this primary cooldown. So basically we're just waiting for the cooldown time to pass and then we're going to get our primary attack back. Cool, so let's look at our next attack. So fire 2, so that's been mapped to D on the keyboard and the right shoulder button. You can do this so long as you're recovered, on the ground and not fatigued again. So then we launch our secondary attack function and we're also setting our move speed to while attacking speed, which is basically a slightly slower moving speed when you're both moving and attacking. And if these things are not true, then we're going to set secondary active to false. We're setting secondary active to true within this secondary attack function. So let's go have a look at that. So we're setting secondary active to true, and here we're adding fatigue every second based on our secondary attack fatigue. Let's have a look at secondary active. We're actually jumping over into our pirate script here. So see, we're switching over. So basically I'm checking the max controller script that secondary is active and that the pirate can take damage, then he's going to take damage basically. If we go back to the max controller, so when secondary active is true, that's when I'm setting this animation ball to secondary attack. So those are our two attacks there. So now let's talk about the parry. The parry was really important to me to get this sorted. We've got a parry button. I've mapped that to S on the keyboard and the left shoulder button on the gamepad. So you need to be recovered, you can't be fatigued to parry, and basically triggering a custom function. Now in the custom function, that's where we're triggering the animation, and it's based on the animation. Here I'm checking if the animation is running, and that is telling the script that we're parrying. So we're parrying if the animation is playing. Here I'm playing the audio source for that parry grunt, and we're setting parrying to true. If the animation is not running, then we're setting parrying to false, and we're disabling that audio source for the grunt. So let's quickly peek at this function. All right, so it's a custom function here. What happens is we set parrying to true. I don't actually need to do that though, do I? Because, yep, let's delete that right now because see, this is the stuff that's going to be all throughout my scripts, is doubling up of stuff. I just feel like if anyone notices anything else that I'm over scripting here, tell me. I'd love to know. So on that parry, we can just set that trigger. And when we check that the parry animation is playing, it's going to tell that bull that parrying is true. So that's all fine. Let's see, can we find all references of that? Yeah, here's the animation state. So parrying is set to true there. Let's see the references of parrying here. All right, so this is where we actually check that the parry is successful. We're doing an on-trigger enter function here. So here I am declaring what the pirate primary script is, and I'm declaring it's the other. So the reason I'm doing this here and basing it on the other game object is because that pirate is actually a prefab, so I need to make sure it's the instance of the prefab that we're colliding with and not some other one in this scene. I was having issues with that before, where basically I was searching by tag and things like that, so I'd be parrying one pirate and it would be testing the collision on a different one. So that's why this other is really important. We need to be focusing on the one that we're colliding with specifically. So we're setting what the pirate primary script is, what the pirate 1 script is, based on the object that we're colliding with. So if on the object that we're colliding with, the collider, the tag is sword trigger, which is a specially animated collider that animates along with the sword. If it's that collider and the pirate is primary attacking, then this is going to happen. So we're checking that it's the sword trigger. And now here I'm checking if we're facing the pirate. Doing a calculation here to see if our last move direction coincides with the direction of the pirate. So there, we check if we're facing the pirate. So now if we're not parrying or we are not facing the pirate, so either of those, so you could be parrying but you're not facing the pirate, then you're going to get hit. So we trigger the sound of hit by sword. We check if we're on the ground, we're going to add force and we're going to get pushed away from the pirate. But yeah, I'm not multiplying by time. I'm not sure whether this force here should be added into fixed update. That's something I'm not sure. If anyone wants to let me know, please do. We're triggering getting stunned if you get hit. So you get stunned a certain amount. And if we can take damage, we're going to take damage there. We're going to trigger that take damage and we're going to take 25 of it. Yeah, but here is where the parry happens. So if we collide with that sword trigger, and we are parrying and facing the pirate, then we're going to have a successful parry. If we have a successful parry, we're enabling the parry hit audio source, and in the pirate 1 script, we're setting primary attacking to false. So we're kind of cutting short that primary attack. We're also stunning the pirate. So if we do a successful parry, we stun the pirate, we're giving them a second of stun time there. And we are also adding force to the pirate and pushing them away from us. So if we have a successful parry, we're stunning the pirate and we're knocking them back a little bit. So that's what that parry is doing. Cool, let's jump out. What else do we have? Yeah, let's just talk a little bit more about our role. So we talked about the role that we're using a modifier key in the input. When we take that input of modifier key and a direction, we're triggering the animation. And here we're checking if we're rolling based on the animation. So if the animation for the roll is playing, we're setting rolling to true. If it's not playing, we're setting rolling to false. So if rolling is true, we're going to take our last move for our direction and we're going to add some velocity onto the player. So I was using velocity on this rigid body instead of add force. I'm still not sure when is the best time to use these things. I'm still working all that out. But yeah, we're adding roll force in the direction of our last move, basically. And what else we're doing when we're rolling is we're ignoring the collisions between layers 8 and 9, which is the enemy and the player layers. We're also setting can take damage to false if we're rolling, so we can't take any damage at that time. And we're adding a little bit of fatigue. If we're not rolling, we're basically just telling the script that we're not going to ignore those collisions anymore. So I think that is the majority of this player controller script as it currently stands. One thing I'm still wanting to work out too is whether I should be separating these out into lots of different scripts rather than having this crazy long script that I'm finding, it's a little bit hard to navigate. It is what it is. And so I've got all these public builds. Those are those crazy ones we were seeing before. A whole heap of builds for whether we're attacking, rolling, parrying, recovering, fatiguing, sprinting, is on ground. Yeah, there's heaps of them. I've got all of this for that fatigue system, and I swear we could be making that a lot simpler. Here is where this is my player component, so our rigid body inputs, getting our last move. Here's where I'm keeping all other scripts and objects, so this is where I'm declaring that we've got this pirate primary script, the game object of the pirate, I'm declaring its rigid body, but again, I'm only defining these variables on that collision other, because it's important that we can't declare them at start because there's so many instances of that prefab, so we have to actually declare what these are within that collision function. So that's important. That was something that was catching me out a lot. These are the UI. Here's where I'm keeping sounds and effects. Yeah, having all these different audio sources is a pain, but it seems to be the only way I can individually turn on and off audio sources. If there's other ways that you know of doing that, please let me know again. I'd love to be schooled on all this. I think that's enough of exposing myself for today. Next time I do something like this, we could maybe look at some of the other scripts that I've got here. So yeah, I'll just to finish, I will just talk you through the components on the player. So these are the components that I currently have. So we've got a script, obviously, which there's way too many public variables. It's all quite hard to follow, but I have been, using this for kind of bug detection and things and just checking what's actually going on. A rigid body, at the moment I have a rigid body, I've given like a 30 kg mass, a linear drag of 2, because sometimes when force was being added, he was just flying off. I wasn't sure if that was because of the way the force was being added, but he had absolutely no drag, so maybe that's going to help. He actually also has a basic friction material on him, which I think should be helping too. So that's our rigid body. We've got our animator, which the animator is kind of looking a bit crazy. I think that's probably enough for us to kind of go through today. Thank you everyone for sticking around to the end of this video. If you liked it, please just hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done that already so you can see my next videos. And also please just let me know if this is the sort of content that you're interested in, if you're interested in seeing more of my scripts in detail like I've done today, or if you'd prefer other types of content like just demos of the progress that I've made during the week. Yeah, let me know about that as well. Just a heads up for next week, what I'm going to be focusing on for this next week is I want to work on designing a bit of a background for the game, just so that it starts to look a bit better. I want all the art to be art that I've drawn, for one, because at the moment that ground is assets that I've just taken from the store. So yeah, hopefully next week's video you'll be able to see a revamped, cooler looking pixel pirate precision pixel pajama game. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.